Hey everyone, it's Future Zelda here. Today we're going to be discussing the 19th mainline entry in the Zelda franchise, and the most recent Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I will explain why it is my favorite game. First off, here's a spoiler warning. I know this game's like 5 years old now, but somebody might be watching this who hasn't played it. This video will probably contain spoilers for most of the story and content in Breath of the Wild, so if you're bothered by that, well, you've been warned. So to start off, as we know from the reviews for Breath of the Wild, it is a game liked by many people. However, some have criticized it for its bad dungeon layout with the divine beasts, its lack of epic overworld music, and its repetitive bosses. Many fans who love the game also say that despite being a great game, it just doesn't feel like a traditional Zelda game. Now, first off, I will agree with the point on bad dungeon layout, because that's my only problem with this game, in my opinion. I think the dungeons could be better, and I hope they improve on this in Breath of the Wild too. But I think there are enough, secrets, puzzles, challenges, trials, all that kind of stuff, and some good shrines in this game that kind of really cover the dungeon side of things. So I don't think that's a very big problem. And the lack of overworld music is simply a complaint against Breath of the Wild's music style. The overworld sees a more calm and peaceful and realistic tone. The music fits that, in my opinion, also since the major point of this game is that Link is alone in a seemingly ruined Hyrule. The quiet and simple overworld music kind of adds to that feeling of, loneliness. Now, about repetitive bosses. Well, repetitive bosses are a problem for some people, and I myself once thought that this was a big flaw with the game, but I've changed my mind since then. The overworld bosses like Stone Taluses, Hinoxes, all that kind of stuff, even with their variations, they get old after a while. I mean, they're kind of repetitive. You see them everywhere. You walk up to a Hinox, just the same routine over and over again. First time I saw a Hinox, I was really excited. I was wondering what it was, and the first couple of Hinoxes I saw were really interesting, but eventually it just gets kind of old. And you're just like, oh, it's another Hinox or Talus. Now, the Molduga, there's less of them, and there's also the Moldu King in the DLC, so I think they're the only overworld boss that isn't repetitive. There's also the leader of the Yiga clan, Master Koga, in the Yiga clan quest. And I think he's the only boss that feels truly unique in the original game. I mean, in the DLC, you also have Monk Maz Koshia, which is a very unique boss, and honestly the best boss in the game, in my opinion. But that's only 2 unique bosses, which just isn't enough for a game. The Blights, the bosses of the 4 Divine Beasts, are all very similar to each other, and also to the final boss, Calamity Ganon, drawing a lot of criticism about repetitive bosses, and it's just another Ganon fight. However, the developers have said that they wanted to add the feeling of Ganon being there at all times, which I think is kind of achieved by this, decision to have all the bosses, the Blights, be similar to the final Calamity Ganon. And each Blight also looks very similar to the champions, like Daruk and Fireblight Ganon both have a great sword. Mipha and Waterblight Ganon both have a trident, sort of spear, Revali, shoots arrows. Windblight Ganon shoots laser beams. Thunderblight Ganon has a sword and shield, or both has a sword and shield, so it kind of fits. They each have similar features, so that works, I think. Overall, I think the Blights are underrated bosses, and they get criticism they just don't deserve. Now, the final boss, or, kind of the final boss, the first half at least, Calamity Ganon, this is like an amalgamation of the 4 Blight Ganons that you fought in the Divine Beasts. I always like this idea, as the final boss combining, elements of 4 previous bosses kind of tests the player on skills they've learned across their adventure on Hyrule. This boss also has a good difficulty level, as in it can be easy or hard depending on what gear you have, and what weapons you have, and how skilled you are. But the fact that players who've defeated the Divine Beasts get to watch as Ganon just instantly loses half his health is kind of disappointing and underwhelming. And it's a big problem with this fight. It has to be that way, though, to reward players for completing the Divine Beasts, and it fit with the story of the champions helping Link in the final battle. The second stage of the final boss, Dark Beast Ganon, is a very hated boss and very easy, and I think it's the only bad boss in this game, to be honest. And on the last criticism, to those who like Breath of the Wild, we'd say it doesn't feel like a Zelda game. Well, I really disagree with that statement. I really don't like it every time I see somebody say that. I think this game has the same feeling of, exploring Hyrule, fighting monsters, meeting all the tribes, defeating Ganon, doing all the quests, getting all the Master Sword. I feel like every game has that feeling, and I feel like Breath of the Wild has that feeling. The only game that doesn't have that feeling is probably like Four Swords or like The Adventure of Link. I think all the other games, including Breath of the Wild, really achieve that feeling really well. You know, it's a Zelda game, but it's just a new kind of Zelda game. The same way that Ocarina of Time changed the formula by making things 3D, the same way Adventure of the Link changed the formula by adding side-scrolling sections. I think Breath of the Wild has just added a new type of Zelda formula with open world, weapon durability, all that good stuff. So I think Breath of the Wild really is a true Zelda game, and that criticism is just inaccurate. So I've talked on the criticisms of the game now, and honestly, I disagree with most of them, and I think this is a good game. But why is it my favorite game? Well, here's why. First off, a lot of fans of this game, their one problem is the story, but I think the story of this game is very underrated. Now, yes, the 10,000-year gap between Link Awakening and the Shrine of Resurrection and the ancient legend 10,000 years ago, the first Calamity, is kind of a ridiculous time gap, but I guess it's an acceptable way for the developers to put the complicated Zelda timeline behind them and start fresh with Breath of the Wild. You know, it's a new era of the Zelda franchise. You know, I think the apocalypse caused by the Great Calamity and the death of the champions and the corruption of the Guardians and the King's death and the Castle Town getting destroyed, I think that's a great central story idea. And the apocalyptic thing really works with the open world style, in my opinion. I just don't get the complaints on this game's story, and I think all the hidden lore with the champion diaries and all the bits of lore you can find across the kingdom if you explore enough, I think those are all really interesting, and it's really cool to find all the secrets, and overall I think this game's story is very underrated and very good. Okay, now, the soundtrack in this game is also top tier in my opinion. Like, this is great soundtrack, like, up there with the Link to the Past and Twilight Princess soundtracks, because there's some great songs like Mipha's theme, Urbosa's theme, Revali's theme, Daruk's theme, you know, the main theme, and the Dark Beast Ganon fight theme, Korok Forest, Zora's Domain, and plenty of others. They're all really good. There's also classic Zelda songs like Zora's Domain and Death Mountain, and the theme that happens when you pull out the Master Sword, you know, the classics. They also are in this soundtrack, and they really add to it. Now, the gameplay of Breath of the Wild is also very fun to work with, and the controls are flawless. The 5 runes control well, the weapon durability system, while annoying, is good enough, and it works, and it's fun. And I think the rest of the gameplay is fine, too. And the characters, well, there aren't very many fleshed out characters in the base game, and they're very weak without the DLC and Age of Calamity, but I think overall the champions are amazing characters, and Zelda is decent in this game, and her character arc and the memories is great. Link also gets a bit of backstory for once in this game with the reference to his father, and also what we learned from Mipha's diary and other sources about his childhood, which that's not happened really before, not on that scale, and I think that's kind of awesome, and I hope these characters and Link get more development in Breath of the Wild 2. And the last reason I like Breath of the Wild is all the memories I have of playing it. My brother bought the game for us in early 2018, and I have over 400 hours in the game now. I haven't played it much lately, and I still need to complete the Champion's Ballad and the Master Trials, and I've yet to collect all the DLC items. I've got some of them, but not all of them. Maybe I'll accomplish more in the game later. Well, that about wraps it up. That's why Breath of the Wild is my favorite game of all time. Now, if you guys have a different opinion on the topic, comment below. I'd enjoy seeing your opinions, and remember that it's okay to disagree as long as you respect everyone's opinions in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. It would really be appreciated, to be honest. Now, see you next time.